Okay, now the President and the First Lady and the entourage have landed in Fort Worth, and they are met by thousands of people at the airport, which is kind of incredible because does anybody remember what time they landed? 11:05 p.m. And there's just thousands of people meeting them at the airport. So is the Texas tour going pretty well for the President so far? It really is. Now, among those thousands of people at the airport, there are several boys from a Catholic elementary school there. And again, this is 11:05 at night, and it's so important to these kids, especially these Catholic kids, that they're at the airport in Fort Worth to meet the President. Now, one of those Catholic boys was an 8-year-old third grader by the name of Bob Machos. Bob Machos. He was one of several boys from a Catholic elementary school that was at the airport to meet the Kennedys. He was an 8-year-old third grader, Bob Machos. And he just happened to be in the right place at the right time and was able to greet both Mrs. Kennedy and the President as they got off the airplane. And the reason I bring up Bob Machos is because he's 8 years old. 50 years later, he remembers that as he met Mrs. Kennedy and the President, Mrs. Kennedy kissed him on the forehead and the President patted him good-naturedly on the head. Never, ever will forget that, considering the events are going to happen in just several hours. So Bob Machos was very fortunate. Mrs. Kennedy kissed him on the forehead and President Kennedy patted him on the head, something he would never forget. Well, the presidential party left the airport en route to the Hotel Texas, where they would spend the night. So they land at the airport, greet thousands of well-wishers, including several boys from a Catholic elementary school, including Bob Machos. And then the presidential party leaves the airport and heads to the Hotel Texas, where they would spend the night. So basically, November 21st, 1963 has ended as far as the lecture goes, and we'll start talking about what happened on November 22nd. And President Kennedy was up very, very early the morning of the 22nd, and he was reading his newspaper that they brought him, and he didn't like the headlines. Didn't like the headlines that were in the local newspaper that was brought to his room. And the reason he didn't like the headlines, because splashed across the headlines of the front page was, quote, Yarborough snubs LBJ. Yarborough snubs LBJ. That's on the front page of the newspaper. First thing the President looks at when he gets the newspaper that day is the headline, Yarborough snubs LBJ. That's the reason he's going there, is to get rid of these hard feelings, and the last thing he wanted to see in the paper was that type of a headline. Okay? He's not very happy with it. And there were two reasons that Senator Yarborough was upset at the Vice President, other than what we already talked about, that led to this headline. Okay? And what happened is, remember, the President was going to appear at a $100 a plate dinner in Austin. And Senator Yarborough had been denied a seat at the head table. And he knew that came from Vice President Johnson. So that was one reason he was upset, other than what we had already talked about, is that Senator Yarborough had been denied a seat at the head table during the President's appearance in Texas later that evening. He was not happy. Now, the Governor Connolly was hosting a social, a reception at the end of the day on the 22nd. He was going to host a social to kind of celebrate how well Texas and Dallas did for the President. And guess who didn't get invited to the social? Senator Yarborough. So he was really upset. He was upset at the Vice President because he didn't get a place at the head table at the dinner in Austin, in which the Vice President was going to kind of honor the President. And he was upset because he had not been invited to the reception that Governor Connolly was hosting at the end of the day on November 22nd. So he was mad, and he was going to snub LBJ. How do you snub somebody? Well, Senator Yarborough was scheduled to ride in the same car as the Vice President and his wife during the motorcade in Dallas. And he said, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to ride with him. And the President did not like that. So Senator Yarborough was going to retaliate because of the way he was treated by refusing to ride in the same car during the motorcade in Dallas with Vice President Johnson and his wife. The president did not want that to happen. That's the reason he went. So just being blunt, when President Kennedy found out all about this, he sent his aides to visit with Yarborough, and they informed Yarborough that he would indeed ride with the vice president. Matter of fact, the president's quotes were, "You tell Yarborough to get his ass in that car with Lyndon." That was the quote that Kennedy gave his aides to tell Yarborough. So the president was very direct. You know what, Senator Yarborough, I get it, but you are going to ride in that car with Vice President Johnson and his wife, whether you like it or not. That's basically what the president had his aides tell Yarborough. And Yarborough agreed, and the two men would ride together in the motorcade in Dallas. But that's what that whole Yarborough snubs LBJ thing was about. So we're still talking about Fort Worth. Well, it's important you kind of keep track of this timeline. At 7 in the morning that day, after reading his paper and getting his aides out on the hunt, so to speak, President Kennedy visited with his personal secretary, Evelyn Lincoln. That is this lady right up here. He visited with his personal secretary, Evelyn Lincoln, at 7 a.m. the morning of the 22nd of November. And the president agreed to meet a few of Mrs. Lincoln's friends in the hallway later that morning. Okay, they had visited. She was very close to the president, and she said, "Oh, gee, would you meet with a few of my friends in the hallway later this morning?" And he agreed that he would do that. And according to Mrs. Lincoln, at that time when she visited with the president, he was in a, quote, very happy mood, very upbeat, very happy, very pleased with the way things were going on this Texas tour. Well, time passes, and at 8:30 a.m., Kennedy meets with two of his closest aides, Kenneth O'Donnell and Lawrence O'Brien. Okay, he meets with Kenneth O'Donnell and Lawrence O'Brien, and they are meeting at 8:30 in the President's Hotel Suite, which is on an elevated floor. Okay? So at 8:30 a.m., President Kennedy met with presidential aides Kenneth O'Donnell and Lawrence O'Brien in his hotel suite. And the president, now picture this in your mind, and O'Donnell and O'Brien were looking out the window of the president's hotel suite towards a parking lot in the hotel. They were looking down on the parking lot. Now this is kind of this is a great the way that Kennedy was. The reason those guys were looking out the window at the parking lot in the hotel is the parking lot was being set up so President Kennedy could address a group of people who were not lucky enough to get tickets for the Chamber of Commerce breakfast. So he's politicking here. So they're setting up a place for him to speak, and you saw a little bit of that on the video, where he's going to actually go down to the hotel parking lot and speak to a group of people who were not lucky enough to get tickets into the Chamber of Commerce breakfast. It was an awesome move. Really, really good move. Well, this is where I want you to just kind of listen carefully, not really write. Now, obviously, after this assassination, a lot of people are going to be giving quotes and stuff about what had happened that day. Well, Lawrence O'Brien was later quoted about a conversation that he had with President Kennedy that morning in the hotel room as they looked down upon the parking lot and watched him making those preparations for his speech. And this is what O'Brien said. He said, quote, "That morning I had been visiting with the president in his suite in Fort Worth, and as was rather typical of him, he walked over to the window, put his foot up on the ledge of the window, and cupped his chin in his hands with his elbow on his knee, and was looking down at the preparations being completed for his outdoor appearance. And then he said to me, 'Gosh, when you look out like this and down at where I'm going to be, if someone wanted to get you, it wouldn't be difficult, would it?'" That's what he said to Lawrence O'Brien that morning. O'Brien continues this quote. He says, "We didn't dwell on it, obviously, but it apparently touched his mind at the moment. Perhaps he had never been in a similar position, looking down on the location of a public appearance he was going to make and realizing how open the view was from the window." Now, prior to this day, and many times he said during his presidency, if any man wants to trade his life for mine, he can do that. And that's true. If anyone's willing to trade their life for yours, it's pretty hard to stop them, okay? And so, obviously, the thought of assassination was on his mind. And I think any president that serves has got to have a thought of that in his mind. And Kennedy obviously did that morning. Well, at 8:40 a.m., the president left his hotel suite and met with Mrs. Lincoln's friends in the hallway like he said he would. So at 8:40 a.m., on the morning of the 22nd of November, President Kennedy left his hotel suite and he met with Mrs. Lincoln's friends in the hallway. And she was later quoted as saying, and again, you don't need to write these down, but this is kind of part of the history. She said, quote, "He gave the usual pleasantries. He said he was pleased to meet them and that any friend of mine were friends of his. He then looked out of the window and commented about how many people were down below. The size of the crowd pleased him." Those are the people that were gathering in the parking lot to listen to him speak that couldn't get tickets. Well, at 8:45 a.m., the president went outside to the platform where he would give that speech in the parking lot. So at 8:45, the president goes outside to the parking lot platform for his speech. And he's introduced by Vice President Johnson. And guess who else is standing on the podium as the president speaks in the parking lot of the Hotel Texas? Senator Yarborough and Governor Conway. The president's got them all up there, standing right next to each other. Hunky stinking dory. Look how good we're getting along. Well, when the president gets introduced by Vice President Johnson, who again was accompanied by Senator Yarborough and Governor Conway, as he started to speak, the crowd started chanting, "Jackie, Jackie, Jackie." Then they'd stop, "Jackie, Jackie, Jackie." And the president was pleased with that, but he was kind of taken back by it. And so he apologized to the crowd because Jackie was not there and made this famous quote. He said, quote, "Mrs. Kennedy is organizing herself. It takes her longer, but of course she looks better than we do when she does." So he basically had to kind of make hay for why she wasn't there. She had not planned to take part in this speech or the Chamber of Commerce breakfast speech that he was about to give. But the president could see by the crowd in the parking lot that he might need her. So what he did is he gave a very, very short speech to the people in the parking lot, and then he entered the grand ballroom of the Hotel Texas at 9 o'clock. So he's seen what's going on here. They're yelling, chanting, "Jackie, Jackie, Jackie." And he gets them calmed down and makes the comment, gives his short speech, and he goes in the ballroom. What does he do next? What's he do next? Think about what he's talking about. What's he do next? He tells Clint Hill, who you saw in the video, who was Jackie's Secret Service agent assigned to her. He sends word to Secret Service agent Clint Hill, and he asks Clint Hill to go back to the hotel and ask Jackie to join her husband at the head table of the grand ballroom because she wasn't planning on doing that. But he could see that the people wanted to see her and that she would be a huge asset for him on this trip. So Agent Clint Hill was sent back to the hotel. He asked Jackie to join her husband at the head table of the grand ballroom of the Texas Hotel. Okay? Now basically, I'm going to wait and stop on the lecture here, but I want you to understand that what they're going to do from this point on is what? Before they start, what are they going to do? They're going to stall. They're going to have to do some things to wait for her to get there because she doesn't know she's coming. But it's kind of an interesting story on what they do. And so we'll pick it up there on Monday or maybe tomorrow if we get done with the quiz in time. It's not a very long quiz and you get to use your notes. We may pick it up tomorrow, but we will not lecture on Friday. So those of you that are going to be gone, you won't have to worry about that. Okay? All righty. Now remember, kiddos, next Tuesday, all your tickets for that raffle are due. We can't forget to get those things turned in.